this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. There are certain cases over the course of time that enter into a very sad portion of our lexicon, I think, here in America. And many of them are known by a variety of different names. I think that it's a convenient way for the media to latch on to something. They can create memories with their customers out there, which, for the media, you are their customers. And it initiates immediate recall where it can take you back in time, because it seems as though that we have so many deaths, and it's hard to remember them. And that's a very sad commentary, I know. But the cases I'm focused on today are actually the infamous yogurt shop murders. But those in and of themselves, for young ladies that were killed at a business establishment, essentially executed by, at that time, an unknown assailant, tragic in and of itself. But unfortunately, there has been another name now attributed to this monster who killed those 4 young ladies. The victim that we will be talking about today is a young woman who died way back in the 90s, and she was kind of forgotten. That victim, her name is Linda Rutledge, and she died at the hands of the yogurt shop murderer, serial killer, Robert Brashers. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, this is one of these individuals who, I don't know, I mean, it seems as though that we haven't seen the last of him. I'm wondering how many more cases are going to be attributed to Brashers as technology continues to develop, and we begin to kind of unravel some of these cases that are out there that for years and years have been, seemingly unsolvable. Mm-hmm. Maybe science is finally catching up in many of these cases. At least that's our hope, right? It's
fascinating that when you were talking about Brashers, that the yogurt shop murders, because there were 4 young girls, all in their teens, that were murdered in Austin, Texas. And, it was labeled the yogurt shop murders, and trying to solve that, it was very difficult. And over the years, I'd seen many different killers associated with that crime. Hey, they could have done it. This person might have done it, And as you mentioned, as the technology has grown, as DNA and genetic genealogy, and a friend of ours, CC Moore at Parabon, I mean, you've got people like that are turning new leaves over every day, and not on crimes that are solved, but crimes that are unsolved, and tying people back that you had no idea. This guy's been dead for, since 1999. And he did, or 98. Anyway, he did himself in. What, Joe, when he died, did you know none of these murders, okay, the man that was a serial killer, when he took his own life with his own daughter's feet away, he had not been tied to any of these murders?
Yeah, no, isn't that something? Yeah, he essentially, I don't know, I'll be rude about it. He smoked himself essentially in a hotel room after having held his family hostage for almost 4 hours, Dave. This gutless coward went beneath a bed and put a gun to his head. Now, fortunately, his family were able to escape the hotel room where he had held them hostage. I'm fascinated by this sort of thing. He strikes out at people outside of his family, but never attacking them. And, I don't know, I guess if we had a forensic psychologist here, we could kind of maybe unpack this a little bit. But just to give you a little insight into something I was thinking about not too long ago, actually, this conversation I had with my wife, because there was this case that had popped up on the radar about a fellow that was going out, and he would commit these egregious crimes after having gotten into an argument at home, and he would target people. It really, and I have worked a series of serial homicides in New Orleans. I may have mentioned this before, but it was involving a fellow who was kind of a diminutive guy, I remember, and he had a girlfriend that was kind of tiny. And every time they would get into a fight, he was kind of one of these retiring yes dear kind of guys, this sort of thing. He would go out, Dave, and pick up a prostitute and sodomize them and strangle them to death with a bit of wire. And this happened several times. I think he, to his credit, I think he killed maybe 6 or 7. I mean, he's certainly within the parameters for a serial killer, but it's almost like this reaction to an environment that he may have been living in at home. And I really wonder about this individual. You know, when he would go out and he would kill people that he had no contact with, did not know them. I'm wondering if this is a reaction to something that's going on within his brain. It's not necessarily that he's going out to hunt, like, you know, you think about a Ted Bundy or something. This is like a reactive thing. You know, I can't strike out my family, but I'm going to go strike out at some, you know, faceless stranger out there. These 4 young women, you know, for instance, in the yogurt shop. And I think all told right now, Dave, is this correct that Brashers, to his credit, they've given him credit for, I don't know, what is it, like 8 plus that we know of right now, and then multiple sexual offenses as well, and adjacent to that.
I think 8 murders so far. And the reason I say so far is because these murders were not attributed to him until after his death. Okay, he didn't serve prison time for any of these, but he did serve prison time. And to back up a little bit, I was looking at his history a little bit because found out that his daughter, Deborah, actually lives in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah.
And when a lot of the story started breaking in 2018, I think they exhumed Brashers' body and they needed some more DNA. And anyway, the long story longer is that caught my attention because with, you know, the activity you and Noah and Kimmy have had up in Huntsville lately, it's top of mind for me. You guys are there every other day, it seems. So
yeah, we do go up there a lot. You know, my son lives up in that area around there now. And so we do visit up there a lot. What a beautiful location. What a dynamic place, Huntsville, Alabama. I love going to visit up there. But yeah, you know, his daughter, Deborah, she actually, you know, going back to this idea of, you know, kind of this, and I don't know if this is true or not, but, you know, she's reflective of her dad. You know, she talks about happy memories that she had with him when they were back in Arkansas, right, Dave? They would go out on outings, canoeing, swimming, camping, bonfires, and all that.
Yeah, there was a 2-year period of time. It was really, and it shows you how important years are for children. Sometimes we forget. She's talking about a time of 2 years when she was about 7 years old, and she had 2 sisters that were twins, I believe, and half sisters. And she talks of the time when it was the 3 girls and mom and dad. And anyway, but to give you an idea, I believe it was almost a Jekyll and Hyde thing, Joe.
Yeah.
That the side that his family saw was inconsistent. Okay. He would be gone for extended periods of time. Now, his daughter, Deborah, said she thought it was him doing construction work out of town. But now when we look at some of the attacks that have already been attributed to him and some that haven't yet, I think we're going to find out that on more than one of those trips, he killed somebody. But she was talking about how on Valentine's Day that he actually came to school with a single red rose for each of his daughters, had individual vases, and he took it to their classrooms and gave it to them. And for a little girl in elementary school, daddy doing that is a big deal. And that's what she remembers of her dad. But then what I was thinking, Joe, you know, he was in the Army and the Navy. Did you know that?
Yeah, yeah, and isn't that an odd? I mean, and listen, I've known people that have served in multiple multiple branches of the military. Not everybody just goes into the Navy and stays in the Navy. I've got a really good friend of mine that started out of the Navy. And was a ceremonial guard at where was he? Oh, for the Secretary of Defense, actually, in the Navy, and then got out and then went back in the Army. So it's not uncommon for that to happen, but it is kind of a unique little twist on this tale. There's something else here too. It's amazing how, you were talking about Deborah and about her reflecting back all these years later, those happy moments. There used to be, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, but there's an old adage about feeding somebody vinegar for most of their life, and then every now and then you get a spoonful of sugar, and it makes you kind of dismiss some of the really bad stuff that you had to take on, and because you remember those one little moments in time where you got that little burst of sugar, that sweetness. And I think about these kids, what was going on inside of that household. Is that one of those sugar moments, that she, reflectively, because you had mentioned this, we were talking about this off air. How is it possible that somebody like this could hide these behaviors? And obviously back then, I think in particular, days prior to social media and certainly cell phones and all these sorts of things, that's one of those things where it was much, much easier, I think, to hide. Nowadays, I think that it would be much more difficult. What say you, buddy?
Well, I was looking over his, the Army Navy thing. Okay.
Yeah.
And he was born in Newport News, Virginia, just outside of Norfolk, okay?
Yeah.
Which is a huge Navy base. Right after he got out of high school, he joined the Army. And then he went to the Navy after that. In Fort Myers, Florida, 1985, that was his first attempted murder and sexual assault. He meets a girl. They go out drinking. They kind of close the bar down, pick up a six-pack, and they're sitting in his truck. And out of nowhere, he attacks her. And she's like, no, I'm not having sex with you. Yeah, I'm drunk and we're, He pulls out a gun and shoots her in the head and in the neck. She crawls away from the truck and he's drunk, can't find her. So he goes to the beach, drives his truck onto the beach and throws his gun out on the beach, out in the water, in the ocean. And then he gets his truck stuck. So he's walking up and down the beach trying to find help to get his truck unstuck. Meanwhile, the girl that he thought he killed, she has crawled on her hands and knees and blood in the middle of the night to an apartment complex.
Yeah.
Where a man finally offers her help and they get help to her. And before they get her to the hospital, she gives a description of the vehicle and the man. And she lived and he was arrested. They picked him up on the beach. So he went to jail right then. Now, this is what was interesting when I was looking at the coverage of this, Joe. An attempted murder, shooting a woman twice and leaving her for dead.
Yeah.
You would think that you're going to life. You're going to prison
for a long time.
No, he got sentenced to 12 years. And I'm not kidding. This is 1985, 86. He actually was sentenced to 12 years in prison in 1986, but he only served 3. Got out in May of 1989. And the one thing about that time in prison, he was not going back to prison. He really was that's it. I ain't going back. But the rest of his life was one big chaotic mess, almost killing that woman. I just have to wonder, it didn't stop there. Other than that 3-year period of time that he was in prison, Joe, I think he probably killed at least one person a year for every year, including.
I think that you're probably right. And let me, I'll hold forth on this just for a second, this idea of these correction models, that we hear about, because, I work with people that teach corrections, in a criminal justice department. I'm in forensics, but I have friends. One of my best friends is a corrections professor. And, I sit here and I think, to me, at least, the way the system is set up, this whole idea of rehabilitation model, how much Let me ask you this, Dave. How much rehabilitation could take place in 27 months after you have popped off 2 rounds into an innocent woman and tried to sexually assault her? And then you, like a coward, you slip back into the night and, try to, evade any kind of capture. So you're telling me that 27 months is sufficient to get you back up and running to get out into society. And taking that, and listen, this is not Minority Report. We cannot predict what somebody is going to do in the future. However, there are certain little markers that you can look for. And if you take the idea that you've just stated, that when he got out, his life is chaos. What's he going to go back to? And he begins to potentially end the lives of other people in those following years. That's terrifying. If you're a family member, you want to go try to put your hands on somebody that made this decision, because how are you going to get them back, man? How are you going to get them back?
Joe, there was something else fascinating about this to me. Okay. He gets out of prison May of 1989, February 18th, 1992. He's arrested in your old stomping grounds, Cobb County, Georgia.
Yep.
All right. He's arrested there for grand theft auto. Now, what do we know took place between May of 89 and February of 92? The yogurt shop murders.
Yes.
They happened in 1991. So he's not caught. That time from 80, he gets out of prison May of 89. He's not caught till February of 92. And then it's not for murder or rape or anything else. He gets arrested for grand theft auto, unlawful possession of a weapon. And he had burglary tools and things like that. Now, here's the catch, Joe. He actually copped a plea because he was looking at a really long sentence, because of the first assault and attempted murder. This grand theft auto with all the other stuff with it, he was going to go 20 years. So what he does, he negotiates a deal. He pleads guilty to the grand theft auto, but they drop all the other charges. He gets a 5-year prison sentence. Got to serve every day. So he did. Between February when he was arrested in 92 until he gets out of prison in 97, February of 97, Joe, he's in prison. The world is safe outside of prison. But from the time he got out of prison until the time he took his own life, there was chaos, murder, and rape.
Yeah, there was. And, echoing back to what you had mentioned just a moment ago, the yogurt shop killings, they took place in Austin, Texas. And correct me if I'm wrong, brother, but that was back in like December of 1991. Mm-hmm. For all those many years that he was on the inside, nothing happened. But when he got out, again, hell was unleashed. And we go all the way to Kentucky on November the 7th, 1998, where a young woman loses her life, not too dissimilar from the way those victims in Austin lost theirs. We have this beautiful young woman. I say young; she's young, relatively speaking. From my perspective, but beautiful all the same. I'm looking at a photo of her right now. Her name's Linda Rutledge, and she looks a lot kind of like a smaller version, if that's possible, of Meg Ryan back in the 90s. And she's got that kind of pixie style haircut that's blonde, short, and she's got this brilliant, 1,000-watt smile, real diminutive looking, and just looks like she, may have been the kindest soul in the world that you would want to meet. But back to that November 7th of 1998 in Lexington, Kentucky, police up there responded to an event that happened at a hearing aid business.
It was a fire.
It was a fire.
Hearing aid thing before hours, Joe. Before you're like 7:30 in the morning or something like that. I mean, how do you have a fire start in a building that's for hearing impaired, for hearing aids.
Well, how do you have one start in a yogurt shop?
Well,
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just say, and
Yeah,
do we see a pattern developing here? And just think about this, Dave. This poor woman she's found, and let's just say that her death was less than peaceful.
My gosh, it wasn't from fire, was it?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It certainly wasn't. And this involves, on the show I generally do not talk about firearms related deaths a lot. There's so many of them, but in this particular case, Dave, from a forensics perspective, firearms and the tracking of firearms and rounds that are spent actually come into play in this particular case, and it was linkage ultimately between the Austin, Texas Police Department and the authorities in Kentucky, right, Dave?
Well, you got to remember now, this is November 7th, 1998. Police are called. There's a fire at this hearing aid place. When they show up to put the fire out, they find Linda Rutledge. She's in a back hallway, and the fire, was to cover up her murder. She's been shot in the face. Now, Joe, when they were first investigating all of this, once they realized that we have a woman who has been shot to death and the fire ostensibly set to cover up that crime, which if you're going to shoot somebody in the head, a fire is not going to cover up the bullet wounds. The bullet holes are still going to show in the skull. So I'm guessing somebody thinks it's a wise thing to set a fire to get rid of, fingerprints and other evidence, maybe?
Yeah, they always do. And, I think that from what little they might understand of trace evidence, which I don't know how much they do. If you've been in the joint, I think probably that's a discussion that might be had among some of your colleagues, that fellow incarcerated colleagues there. They might talk about that sort of thing. I have no idea. But, you might think that everything is eradicated, but as I've always stated, and will continue to state, the idea that you're going to get rid of everything with fire is false. Now, let me put it to you this way. In the yogurt shop cases, I don't want to disrespect the dead. Cases, I think that fire was utilized in that case. And
well, hey, Joe, back up to that a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey guys, just so we're really clear, both of these cases, the yogurt shop murders from 91 and the 98 Lexington murder fire, they were cold cases.
Yes.
They both were not solved until many years later. And the Lexington murder of Linda Rutledge was tied back to the yogurt shop murders because of a shell casing on a bullet, correct?
Yeah, it was.
Right. And now at the yogurt shop murders, Joe, what happened there?
Well, you've got these 4 young women that are inhabiting, this shop, this yogurt shop, and fella comes in. They don't know who he is, but he makes his way in there and essentially rains down hell on these 4 individuals. Now, they didn't all work there. Okay. I think that some people are under the impression that all these young ladies worked in there and they were pulling a shift together. And that's not the case. One, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, was actually waiting for a ride.
Well, Jennifer Harbison and Eliza Thomas were both 17. They were working. Sarah Harbison is Jennifer's little sister. She was just there with her friend, Amy Ayers. They were just there hanging out, waiting for Jennifer Harbison to get off work.
Yep. And, they're just buddies hanging out. And listen, how many times over the years have, I don't know, the thing that comes to mind, I can't believe it's not yogurt shops, that are out there. How many times, and this is the same kind of business, how many times have we walked in there? And I know that when my kids were little, we would go to, I can't believe it's yogurt shop. There was a couple of them that we went to, and you just hang out. And it looks like the most innocuous, non-violent place in the world. And most of the time they're like in a strip mall, adjacent to maybe bigger stores or something. And you get a lot of teens that are in there over a period of time, particularly at night. I think that it used to be used as maybe like a first date location, or after we go to the movies, let's go get yogurt, that sort of thing. Wow. But who would think that someone would come into this location, and not only the person that perpetrated the yogurt shop killings, they when they found these victims' bodies in there, like you had mentioned, there had been fire set, which means that this perpetrator had to show up with accelerant in hand. Okay.
Wow, I didn't think about that, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, where are you going to find accelerant in an I can't believe it's not yogurt shop? And so he comes prepared, I think, to do this. He has bound them, he has gagged them, and he killed all of them execution style by shooting them and with a handgun. Now at that scene, Dave, and you had mentioned this just a moment ago, there were shell casings found. Well, that shell casing that was found at that scene also matched a shell casing that was found in Lexington all these years later. Almost it's pretty close to a decade later, right? And that the shell casing itself, those two shell casings actually matched up in the national database that's used. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the ATF essentially has control over this database. And so anytime you have so folks understand, because you hear a lot about things like DNA databases, certainly APHIS with fingerprints, people don't think about firearms, okay, most of the time. But when you have a firearm in an unknown case, like in a homicide case, the scientific examination of each one of the elements, whether it be a shell casing or the actual projectile that's either recovered at the scene, recovered in the body, all those little scratches and striations that are on the surfaces of each one of those items, they're actually entered in to the BIN network, okay, which is the database that is controlled by the ATF. It's the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. Do you want to hear something interesting about why this thing is set up and why it's controlled by the ATF? Well, the ATF actually does, or has done for years and years, a lot of work involving gang-related killings. And there were so many, you remember back in the 80s in particular, where, drive-by shootings became all the thing. How many movies were made? I remember the movie Colors that came out with Robert Duvall and Sean Penn. And it highlighted the drive-by shootings in L.A., and they were happening everywhere. We had them in New Orleans back during that time. Well, the ATF became really focused in this area, and they knew that these weapons were associated with organized crime groups, whether it be outlaw biker gangs, street gangs, any kind of organized, cartel people, or any kind of other organized crime syndicates or whatnot. And there was like a network of these weapons. And some of these weapons, fascinatingly enough, we actually had a guy in Atlanta that would rent weapons to perpetrators, and then they would bring them back to him, and he would send them out again for a rental fee. You believe that? Yeah, actually.
You're going to say, I need a gun that's been used to kill 11 people that all have blue eyes. Do you have one like that?
Well, the thing about it is, and I remember this when it happened because I'd never heard of such. The ballistic matches on multiple unassociated homicides were coming back to a single platform, and you knew that it's the same person that was involved in it. So it gets rather dicey. Wow. And so this database was actually set up. And I know I don't have all the exact details, but this is kind of the genesis for this thing, how it happened. And because the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, all right, it used to be called ATFE, but we understand they work with explosives. E stands for explosives. I was saying ATFE for years and years. They said, no, it's back to ATF now. At any rate, I love working with those guys. But at any rate, they set up this network. And now, because of cases out there with unknown weapons or questioned weapons where you have a bit of ballistic data and you have to plug it in to see if there are any other matches around the country, there might be a chance that you're going to get a hit on it. And in this particular case, they did. And it goes all the way back to a known serial killer. With Linda Rutledge in Lexington, Kentucky, one of the things that stood out in her case is that she's not shot once, she's not shot twice, she's shot multiple times in the head, Dave. I've often wondered why people do that. Most of the time, if you're in a dominant position, which is a position of what's called asymmetry, you're in an asymmetrical position. Generally, if you're talking about an execution style shooting, the person is many times kneeling before you or on the ground before you, not you. The universal you as it applies to perpetrators wielding weapons, and the individual is fired into. I think that many people out there might think that, one round would not be sufficient. I guess it all depends on how randomized the shots are. If an individual is proficient at shooting, generally one round will do the trick. And put an individual down. Say, for instance, they're shot in the area of the primal brain area, back in the back where the brainstem is, and this sort of thing. Kind of this classic imagery that we have of people being executed. But it's always kind of fascinated me that people would fire multiple rounds. And here's something else, because there's a bit of inefficiency here, I think. And I think that some of the psychopathology kind of rolls over into their inability to be efficient. You got somebody that is raging out there that's on kind of an adrenaline dump, and they're doing this. And I think that that's what this is all about. Again, I think that not everything's related to sex. I don't want you to think that, but I think that it's all about domination, control, and sex. He's going to pump multiple rounds into her. And, Dave, every time he does that, every time he pulls that trigger, every time that hammer slams forward, every time that round is ejected out of that port, every time a projectile travels down that rifled barrel of a tiny .380 caliber pistol, he's leaving behind more evidence. With each shell that is ejected, each round that comes out, he's just populating that area with more and more evidence. And here's the thing. Let me tell you what we can figure out from this. First off, it's the standard stuff that we think about with range of fire. How far away was the end of the muzzle from the contact position where they were shot? But here's something else. One of the big questions we always have at scenes is, if you have multiple gunshot wounds, a big question that you always have to ask in firearms-related deaths is there more than one weapon? Is there more than one weapon? Well, pretty quickly with a case like this, if you find the area surrounding, which would have been difficult, by the way, because in this young woman's case, there was fire involved. You're going to find multiple spent casings in this area. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. I know the obvious answer. Would it be common practice to walk into a hearing aid shop and find spent brass on the ground? No, it wouldn't be. So you have to believe logically that spent brass, those spent shell casings, are in fact associated with this case. I mean, I guess some lawyer could argue, well, the guy that works there loves guns and he spreads spent shell casings everywhere.
Yeah, because that's what you do with them, Joe.
That's it. And this individual is not taking time to pick these up either, which is something else that, we've talked about this with recently with the Ohio the Ohio double homicide up there, where they're saying they keep saying multiple gunshot wounds, but we only have 3 casings, and we
shells.
And we kind of talked about, did he hang around in there long enough to pick up the shell casings? I don't know. I really don't. But at any rate, at this particular case in Lexington, shell casings were left. You've got this woman who has been executed in this business and then set on fire. I think the big question is, looking back through time, and we're going all the way back to 1998, what were her behaviors prior to that? When had she been spotted by this guy? When did she enter onto his radar? She's not an unattractive person. Did he follow her around in this area? And what in the hell is he doing in Lexington, Kentucky? Because, if you're in Lexington, and this guy, Dave, am I correct? But I could have sworn that I saw that he's got cases that are in multiple states, correct?
Yeah. Arkansas, Missouri, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas. Yeah.
So he's migrating around a lot.
But you also got to remember, Joe, after Austin and the yogurt shop murders in 91, what happens? He's in Macon, Georgia in 92 when he's arrested on the stolen vehicle charge and goes to prison for 5 years. He gets out of prison, and we have the Lexington murder. By the way, 91 yogurt case, cold. Lexington case ends up going cold.
Stone cold, yeah.
But in between there, Joe, what got me is 7:40 in the morning. You get a fire. I get that. Fires can start, electrical, whatever. But to find a woman shot to death at that time of day just seems odd to me. When you mention, where did they come in contact? Where did he see her? How did he know there was anybody even working at a hearing aid place at that time of the day? I
got to tell you, I've got my primary doc where I go. There is a hearing specialist next to, and I know they have business. Okay. Right. But I got to tell you, brother, I don't see like a whole line of, like, the parking spaces are always empty in front of it. It's not like my doctor's office where you've got to hunt and peck to try to find a parking spot. How does he come in contact with her in there? And I think that's kind of going to be an everlasting question. But Dave, there was genetic material that was left behind in this case. And I think that CeCe Moore had something to do with this. Is this correct?
It's so unusual how this all worked out, because, when you go to, when you that we've got these 2 cases tied together by a shell. What I have trouble grasping, Joe, is that between 91 and 98, he was in prison for 5 years and came out, had the same gun. You're going to tell me that in all that time that you were gone, nobody found and got rid of the gun? Yeah. I mean, did he have it? Does he have like a stash of murder weapons that he kept? Like, that crazy guy did that sewed the girl's eyes open. I'm just really bothered by how much this guy did in very brief periods of time. Because, it wasn't just Lexington either, Joe. It wasn't just that murder. You realize that he also was released. He was arrested for breaking into a woman's house in April of 98. A woman he had done some work in Arkansas. He breaks into her house early in the morning and cuts a phone line and a video camera and some locksmithing tools. He's caught with those. After he goes and breaks into this woman's house, he gets arrested. But you know what? Somehow he got bonded out. With his record of everything, he still got bonded out of jail, and then 6 months later kills in Lexington, Kentucky. Now,
go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
Well, both of these cases were cold. I say the 91 case and the yogurt shop murders were cold. The Lexington case was cold. We're talking about coming up to, in the last 10 years, CeCe Moore in 2018, Parabon Nanolabs, doing some investigative genetic genealogy. They actually identified Brasher when they were trying to, building out a suspect for the murders and several rapes. Not Austin, not the yogurt murders, not Lexington, but for murders that were happening in other places. Prosecutors from New Madrid County and Pemiscot in Missouri, they all filed motions to exhume this guy's body so that they could do additional testing. And it was in 2018, the casket of Brasher's remains were exhumed and they were able to extract DNA from his bones. And that's how we come to finding out everything we know about this guy up until then, up until 2018, Joe. Didn't know he was a serial killer.
No, it didn't. And I got to tell you, can I go back to something you said about how did he have the weapon?
Yeah.
You know what term comes to mind? Murder kit.
Yeah.
We've talked about murder kits before.
Wow.
And it's something that's associated with serial killers, that they, you know how I said that he obviously showed up to the yogurt shop with devilment on his mind, because he had the ability to bind and gag and also start a fire, right? Who shows up to a hearing aid center with an accelerant present? So I think that he had this stashed away. Now, I actually hosted the guy that put the handcuffs on Dennis Rader, BTK. I hosted him at my previous university, and what a fascinating story this was. He talked for, oh my Lord, this guy must have talked for 4 hours. It was him and his partner, and they came in, and he's the guy that's actually in the interview room with BTK when BTK, they ask him directly, did you do it? He's like, I'm BTK, like that.
Wow.
And he's the guy that puts the bracelets on him. And so he was telling me about Rader's house, and he was telling me about how he had and he was a souvenir collector too, and how he had the stuff squirreled away behind the staircase, right? And he had all of his things that he valued in the world, that were set aside. I think that there was a kit that he had as well. Remember, Rader, interestingly enough, loved cutting phone lines as well. When people had hard lines going into the house. And so that's kind of a connection thing. And Rader was also someone that was not on the radar of his family.
No.
He was committing all this stuff. So, you think about the pathology that's involved here. I think Dave, kind of talking about this and thinking about it, with this poor woman who, is long since deceased, since 1998, died, at the hand of this person so horribly, at 43 years of age. I don't know, Dave. I really don't know if she's going to be the last one.
No.
I still have questions. I think that we did cover, thinking back on it, we did cover previously the identification in the yogurt shop case, because that was a big splash when that happened. I can't remember the date of it, but here we are again. We're back with this monster Brasher. Look, I hope for his family, wherever they are, I hope that they're healing in their own way. And, his daughter, I'm thinking about her right now, but I'm also thinking about all these other lives that he touched along the way. And I don't mean in a good way. There was no benevolence about this guy. This guy was pure evil. And I just wonder how many other cases are out there that perhaps, Dave, through the use of forensic genetic genealogy, we're going to find out more. And you never know. As time goes by, there might be more added to the list. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.